An international report has identified South Africa as the source, transit point, as well as a destination for human trafficking. The report was compiled by the U.S. Agency for International Development and its research partners and is aimed at providing evidence on the nature and magnitude of human trafficking in South Africa to policymakers. Advocate Brenda Madumise, the director of women empowerment organization Wise for Africa, joins us to talk more about this. Advocate, thanks for your time. It's good to have you to have this conversation about a very uncomfortable topic, and yet something that we need to speak about, because I don't think that we understand the severity of human trafficking here in South Africa, and this report may just shed a lot more light on it.
Good morning, Leanne, and absolutely. That report is long overdue, and it is, I understand, it will be released in March in full. It's something that South Africans need to grapple with and understand the extent, the complexity, and the magnitude of the problem. Human trafficking, and it's sex trafficking most of the time, is worldwide. And if South Africa plays a bigger role in that global network, then there's cause for concern, and for us to stop for a second and decide how we're going to attend to it and deal with it. Remember, we also have the prevention and combating of trafficking of persons. We've got a law. And we should be asking ourselves, if we do have a policy framework and legislation that assists law enforcement agencies, that assists all of us as citizens of this country on how to combat and prevent human trafficking, why is it that now this report highlights that we as a country are a source and a transit for human trafficking?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about this, because from what I'm understanding, and it took me back slightly, where we look at just a bit, as you say, the full report is only coming out in March, but the little bit of information that is available. So we'll talk to what we know so far. They're saying that the biggest areas that are seeing the human trafficking, the areas that have been identified as the sex traffic hubs, is the Johannesburg CBD, Saxonwold, and Sandringham here in Johannesburg. This really sort of shook me a little bit. I mean, these are the residential areas, some of the areas you wouldn't think that this is where it's happening, and yet these have been identified as the key hotspot areas.
Yeah, and to your point, most people will think that it could never happen in suburbia, especially high-end suburbia, right? So it's Sandringham, it's Saxonwold. I remember 5 years ago how we got to know that a brothel was operating in Houghton was through housekeepers, because housekeepers get to know the ins and outs in their streets. They were the ones who told us that in this street, on 5th Street in Houghton, there is a brothel going on. So the coordination that needs to happen is that society and communities must be alert and know what is going on. They should not be let down by law enforcement agencies, because I think there's goodwill from South Africans to report crimes now that people get to know, and they have the information. They're able to whistleblow, they're able to tell others that this is what's going on in my area. But once that information is taken over to law enforcement agencies is where you find the gaps and you find challenges, because sometimes law enforcement agencies would have known about that area and decided to look the other way. Possibly that they are being paid to look the other way, or maybe they're overstretched because we are all inundated with all sorts of things in this country. But human trafficking has not been put on the national agenda as it should be in this country. All other jurisdictions, if you look at them, whether it's in the US, whether it's in the UK, and you will see in the US they've been successful with challenging Pornhub for using underage children in trafficking, and they were able to shut down some of those sites in Pornhub because those young girls were being trafficked. They were lured into this kind of work under the pretense that they've got a job, only to find that it's sex work.
Indeed. And this is something that we see happening so often, and it's so freely available. It is out there. It is something that everybody's seeing, watching, and keeping very quiet about. And this is a great worry. It really is. And I mean, we speak about this. We speak about the fact of how these young girls and women are lured through, making them addicted to drugs. And then they are stuck in this world where they just cannot get out of it. All forms of identity is taken away from them, and that is what becomes of them. But what scares me most of all, and Advocate, just again reading into this, is how they are saying that 11,000 cases have been reported to police over 7 years, and less than 80 human trafficking cases actually made it into the country's courts. This frightens me. What's going on there?
And it should frighten all of us. And it's not just that case or those cases. It's a pervasive, cancer in this country that law enforcement is our Achilles heel in this country. It is, and we need not shy from it and saying it. It is an Achilles heel that unless a matter becomes prominent and high profile, is then that you see the police acting with gusto and fervor. But day to day, you require a law enforcement culture that is, one, dedicated to being swift and precise with their investigations and acting once something is reported to them. This laissez-faire attitude that we get from South African Police Service, it's not helping. It's not helping this country. So in human trafficking, you need a multi-sectoral approach. You need Home Affairs in it. You need the Hawks. Remember, human trafficking also is dedicated to the Hawks. The Hawks are supposed to, they have got a unit that just deals with human trafficking. So that unit has to up their game and ensure that they give the confidence to South Africans that they are attending to it. One of the challenges faced by the police, I think, especially in prosecution, which is the NPA, is when you have to find witnesses. Because, once you are lured into this work, your passport is taken away, your ID document is taken away, and when they are raided, for instance, and your trafficker produces a fake marriage certificate, then the police they can't act because now there's a marriage certificate. They still need to check the veracity of that marriage certificate. It happens that they will produce fake and information and documents, and then the police don't go further because they think that those documents are real. So that's why you need. It can't be the Hawks sitting alone. Yeah. It's a multi-sectoral approach that requires Home Affairs, that requires the Hawks, SAPS, NPA, and everybody has to come to the party with that determination to rid this country that we don't become a transit point and destination. We are a destination because we've got a number of brothels in this country. We've got a number of strip joints that bring in East European girls under the pretense of a job, and only to find that they are now going to be subjected to these inhumane conditions.
Yeah, and this is I know it's a global trend, and it is something that is very frightening, that people need to keep their eyes very open. There's something that you spoke about quite earlier on in this interview, was where people are the ones, the citizens are the ones that need to keep their eyes open. I mean, there's a case that we're going to see happening in court this morning. It's this Gerard Ackerman. I mean, he's got 740 charges. Let's just remind viewers, 740 charges against him. He's accused of it, ranging from rape, attempted murder, distribution of child pornography, and human trafficking of minor children for sexual exploitation. Now, he was out on 6,000 Rand bail, 6,000 Rand bail.
That's ridiculous.
He then didn't come to court. And you know who arrested him? Citizens arrested him. They saw him walking around a shopping center in Florida. They jumped on him, called the police and said, "We've got him, come and arrest him." Now, this, I mean...
Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
No, you finish the story for me, because inside my house I'm thinking nothing is right about this story.
So a couple of things. So the citizens did exactly that. You then have law enforcement, and when I say law enforcement, I talk about the entire value chain in the law enforcement chain. that you are presented with someone with such a long docket of transgressions, close to 700, that minor children involved, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and 12-year-olds. You release that individual on bail. And in fact, you make a mockery of it and say 6,000 rand. That person is a possible flight risk. And in fact, he has shown you that I am a risk, a flight risk. Because if he was able to be released on a 6,000 rand bail and not appear when he was supposed to appear, and you thought that by doing that, you have secured his attendance to court. No, those people are dangerous. Those people should be kept in until the trial is completed. And that's the attitude that the magistrate should have taken, the prosecutor who is leading this case should have taken, and not be soft. And that's what we require. We require that kind of involvement, that kind of sensitivity, and understand that once you let someone like that out, the community gets frustrated. They just get despondent, and they're not going to be willing to assist, because they think that it's just going downhill and their efforts are not recognized.
Yeah. And it's a great worry. It really is a great worry, because, I mean, even, I think it was last week, we were having a conversation with one of our guests talking about how, you know, these people are preying on young girls everywhere, in shopping centres, at nightclubs, in schools, you name it. I know that we're talking to the fact that this may become that South Africa is looking like a transit hub, but it's also young South African girls that are falling victim to this, and it's through different provinces that they're taken from the one to the other, and then they find themselves in a situation that they cannot get out of. They're told how beautiful they are, and they could be a model, and they could be a famous actress, or whatever the case may be, and that is the end of them. And it's a very, very big problem that's happening here in South Africa. But if we talk about being a transit hub, I mean, what is this telling us about our borders and the porousness of our borders? Because that is a big worry.
Yeah, we have said it a number of times that we've got porous borders. I mean, we live it every day, and you hear from the powers that be being, beating up their chest of things that they're going to do and change, and absolutely nothing that gets done. So, if you don't have proper border control, where you do not know who comes in and out. We know in this country at the moment that we have been told we don't know how many people who don't have legal documents to be in the country. How many do we have? Because it has been a free for all. You can enter and get out as you please. No one checks on you. And our response as a country was that, oh my goodness, we're going to appoint border control patrols. Now we need to ask. As of today, with those border patrols being deployed, has anything changed? Do we still have people who can just walk into the country, no record of them? And fundamentally, Leanne, is this country has got multiple databases sitting fragmented. No, not one talking to the other. If we were to ask Minister of Home Affairs to come and tell us where our fingerprints are located and stored, whether there's a repository that can be accessed by the South African police, can be accessed by the NPA, can be accessed by customs and SARS, can be accessed by the Hawks, you'll be shocked, because all of these databases are desperate and sitting in individual ministries. So that's a problem, because you are not going to be able to connect these crimes, because one part of government has got this information and you don't have that information. They're not talking to each other. Yeah. Now, and also, these traffickers prey on the vulnerable, prey on people who are experiencing financial challenges, right? When you are a student, you are on NSFAS and you cannot afford even to have accommodation. You're sleeping in the library as a student, and someone promises you, lures into a job and says, I've got a job for you, and you take it because you think it might change your fortunes, only to find that you are actually a modern day slave. And that's what's happening to many of our young girls. And I mean, children are helpless. because there's nothing they can do, but they're being kidnapped on a daily basis and trafficked.
Yeah. I wanted to also talk about, I mean, the topic of conversation that I think is exceptionally topical right now is the decriminalization of sex workers in the country. Now, talking to experts, and in fact, this was the conversation we had last week, because I think the deadline is coming up. Well, I'm trying to look for the date.
Public comments.
It is now, right? I think it's the end of this month.
This week, yeah.
It's this week,
yeah.
It's coming up, the public comments. And there is a great worry that by decriminalizing sex work in South Africa, this is going to open even more trafficking up, because you're going to find even more people coming in or being trafficked into the country for sex work, which is now decriminalized. But the reality is that what comes with it could be huge problems associated with it. That's what some people are believing. Others are saying, no, it is a good thing that that you could have sex workers that finally have a lot more right to do the job that they want to do. Where do you stand on this, and with particular reference to human trafficking and how this may exacerbate the situation?
So first of all, I think as a country, we need to understand that we've got a constitution that gives us the right to choose, right? We all choose careers that you want to be involved in. They might be precarious, some of these careers that we choose, but that's the nature of the beast, that if I choose that the sex work is work that I want to be involved in, that's my choice. What we're trying to do is to make sure that we protect the women who are in that space, right? Same as we want to protect the farm workers who get paid with alcohol. You need to protect their rights to be recognized as human beings and be compensated correctly and properly. Now, if we do not protect the sex workers, the violence continues with the sex workers. Those who are, potential buyers of this kind of service, they abuse those girls. They abuse those. There's a litany of stories that you hear from the women of what happens to them. Mm-hmm. If you do regulate it, and I think we have got jurisdictions that have shown that you can do it successfully, I think the reluctance or the fear from most Africans is that if you have the kind of law enforcement that we have had for so long in this country, the chances of police officers and law officials enforcing the law is very slim. And so it then opens up a can of worms where everyone thinks that we can do and bring as many people as we can because everyone wants to be a sex worker. So I think at the core of this thing, let's not lose sight of what we are trying to achieve with the decrim of sex work. But I think what we need and to give the confidence to South Africans is that the law enforcement part of it will work. But I think we know that history has taught us, our reality has taught us on a daily basis that that's not the case. So people have got the right to be concerned because they know that, more can happen.
Indeed. All right.
So the state has got an obligation. If the state is serious about decrim of sex work, then they need to beef up the law enforcement side and the criminal justice system. They have to beef it up.
Advocate, we've got to leave it there. We will certainly invite you back when this full report comes out into the full extent of human trafficking here in South Africa. It is a devastating story. Advocate Brenda Madumise, the director of women's empowerment organization Wise for Africa, commenting on this international report and the shocking stories that certainly do come out of it. Even one that was reported in Saturday newspapers about a house in Bryanston where ladies that had been trafficked from the east to South Africa are basically being held captive there, passports taken away, and are forced into this world. Their visas have expired and there is nothing they can do. And this is a very big problem.